Welcome to Season 7, Episode 42 of the Be Conscious podcast. Today, I have the pleasure of interviewing Matthew Brownstein. Here we go.
Welcome to the Be Conscious podcast, the show that brings you enlightened perspectives on the frequency of money, life's many challenges, and those heavy feelings that may be holding you back from living your best life. And now your host, Dr. Susan Nicholas.
CEO of Anahat Education Group and the Executive Director of the Institute of Interpersonal Hypnotherapy. Matthew founded the International Association of Interpersonal Hypnotherapists and onlinemonastery.com, where he teaches the Anahat meditation system. Matthew is also the author of 5 books, and I am very curious today to have Matthew tell us about his works and what he is doing to change the world for the better. Matthew, welcome to the Be Conscious podcast.
Thank you so much for having me on.
Matthew, you have a very interesting background and a tremendous amount of accomplishments. One thing that I learned about you was that you had your first, you called it an awakening at 19 years old. And I'm wondering if you could frame for us kind of the before, the catalyst, and perhaps the after. So, what was happening, or who were you in your life before this awakening? What happened? What was the catalyst for it, perhaps? And then, if you can take us into what you are doing today and how that is related.
Yeah, sure. So before I woke up spiritually when I was 19 years old, completely uneventful, really. Life didn't really mean anything. I was just average, normal person, hardly, not really even noteworthy, honestly. And then I was lying in bed one night. I had just finished making love with my girlfriend of the time. She was rubbing my chest and just my heart, but there's nothing really unique about that moment. It wasn't like the first time or anything. And all of a sudden, the whole room just became light. Everything was love, everything was bliss, it was goodness, it was grace. I used the word God, and I was atheistic and agnostic, somewhere in those categories before that happened. But when that happened, I said, wow, whatever they call God, this is God, because this is universal love and it permeates everything. I was speaking this way when this happened to me. I was describing my experience to my girlfriend, and she was scared because she never heard me talk like that before. It was like a different person,
Mm-hmm.
because the person before, just again, there's nothing really worth mentioning. But when that happened, everything made sense. It was clarity, it was beauty. That led to an entire path of studying religion and philosophy at the university level. Chinese medicine became a huge part of my background in 2 different Chinese medical colleges. Yet that really led to hypnotherapy, because I realized the power of the mind is really the most important thing, because the blocks to all that love and joy, we call them energy blockages. That was the real thing. I started studying what's blocking me and others from having this experience, right? This is the source of all
Mm-hmm.
healing. And we all appear to be blocked to it. Some people have tapped in, but didn't seem like a whole lot. And yeah, it was hypnotherapy where I could use the mind, make shifts in the mind to change the emotional state, the energy body, even the physical body, and help people to wake up to who they are spiritually. So yeah, it led to today where I'm leading one of the most respected, biggest hypnotherapy schools and associations, I guess, in the world, perhaps. But yeah, making as many major strides as I can towards raising the standards of hypnotherapy, because it's just been so valuable in helping me and others to tap into that universal experience.
Hmm. That's very interesting. You said before this awakening experience, you felt that your life was unremarkable and you would have considered yourself atheist or agnostic, somewhere along that line of not, I guess, believing in anything. would you agree that y let me put it this way, I mean, of course, only hindsight is 2020, but do you believe that if you considered yourself agnostic or atheist, that you were seeking some sort of connection? I mean, covertly, that maybe there was something that was missing in your life?
Yeah, I can't say I was consciously seeking. I was in college. I was a liberal arts major, still didn't know what I was going to be when I grew up. I had taken a course just because I think everybody does in college in your early studies of religion, philosophy, and ethics. I did take classes in that. It certainly opened my mind, but I felt like they were just classes like any other class. You just learned about things. But it was something about, I suppose, having studied a little bit of Buddhism in my first religion class, I
Mhm.
didn't honestly at that age even know how to spell Buddhist because I went back to my journals and I was like, oh my God, I didn't even know how to spell Buddhist at the time. So I can't say I was a religious scholar. I mean, I turned to one of my uncles. I was asking my whole family, "What happened to me? Have you ever had this experience? Have you ever heard of this?" Nobody did, but one of my uncles said, "Oh, maybe you need to look to Taoist philosophy." And I misspelled Taoist in my journals
Mhm.
at that time. So I really knew very, very little about any type of spiritual religious path. But I think the catalyst, it wasn't because I was suffering. I mean, I was certainly wanting to know what to do with my life. But I think I was humble enough when I look back to say, like, the agnosticism was just, I don't know. I really don't know.
Mhm.
I don't know who I am. I don't know what to do with my life. I don't know what to major in college. And maybe it was that open mindedness that was the catalyst to allow something bigger to invade me, because that's what it felt like. It wasn't a conscious
Mm.
choice to say, oh, I want to tap into universal love. I really didn't know that existed. But when it invaded my consciousness, that's the best word for it. It wasn't like, I think I'll just start seeking. It was, oh, if I use the G word, it was like God saying, here I am. But then the
Mhm.
next morning, that experience was gone, and it really made me an intense seeker of truth. I just became a devotee,
Mhm.
somebody who was fanatical to say that was too profound to not learn more about what had happened. Uh, so, yeah, kind of unremarkable before, but open minded enough to really become a true seeker of that deeper truth.
You know, I've thought about this experience of what you called love, of that true unconditional love, and that to recognize it as profound, perhaps is an indication that it was not there, or um, you didn't know it before that, or perhaps not the intensity of it. Was there a part of you that was not experiencing unconditional love in your life?
No, actually, to the contrary, my parents were wonderful, still are wonderful. I grew up with a lot of love. I was lying in bed with my girlfriend at the time. I know we really loved each other. The difference when I say not just unconditional love, but this was universal, this was cosmic. It was
Mm.
literally, it wasn't like, oh my God, I'm feeling love now. I've been depressed my whole life. I was really perfectly fine, average, normal person. But I hadn't had a significant mystical awakening. So I believe everybody's tapped into a little bit of light, a little bit of love. Like nobody's ever gone through life and not experienced some love in some way. But
Mhm,
this
mhm,
was where
mhm,
the whole room was made of light. It wasn't just a feeling,
mhm,
it was what I eventually learned when I got into religious studies. There's a term in the religion Jainism called Samyak Darshan. It's the first time I heard a term that related to what happened to me. And Samyak Darshan was translated in the book I read called The Soul's First Glimpse of Itself. And
mm,
I realized, oh, there is something like in the Zen tradition, they call it Satori. There's a first awakening, and there's subsequent awakenings that occur. And I really just dedicated my life to understanding the enlightenment process. And everybody's experienced love to some degree. Yet enlightenment is where there's only love.
mm,
And I could never have professed to have tapped into the degree of that. before 19. And at 19, it was only a glimpse. It took
Mhm.
years of meditating, yoga, Tai Chi, living in monasteries and ashrams, living in the Himalayas in India to tap into that more and more and more because it was just so profound. And I know you've had out of body experiences. So when those started happening to me, it was much different than, oh, I felt a little bit more love. These are like, cosmic conscious experiences that will change you forever.
Mhm. Oh, well, you know well enough that I know exactly what you're talking about. I'm always very curious about what propels people. You probably have heard it in your studies, the awakening of the Merkaba, or the activation of the Merkaba.
Hmm.
Um, and that's what, to me, that sounds like, I guess, people have described when I've described my experiences, they said, "Oh yeah, that was an activation of what I believe is a part of all of us, but may lie dormant or latent within us until it is activated." And what can activate it, I guess, can be any number of things. Maybe the experience of that love in your relationship with your girlfriend, or the time in your life when you were just beginning to touch into or learn about different types of faiths, ideologies, and belief systems. But whatever it was, I don't know if anyone can put their finger on it. It turned I believe these latent genes on, and when I call them genes because it has come to my understanding, Matthew, that I know in studying medicine we have this belief, or this I don't want to even call it knowledge, but this understanding that there is something called junk DNA that we don't know what it codes for, or the function of it. And since my awakening, I've always questioned the idea of, could it be possible that we have junk DNA? And could this be where this enlightened perceptions, where people call them the clairs, where your clairaudience, your clairvoyance, where all of your superpowers lie, the superpowers that lie within humanity? Could it be coded in this kind of throwaway DNA that, at least in allopathic medicine, we don't know what it does? And so I kind of thought about stuff like this very deeply, and recognized that there's something that's turned on when we wake up and, go toward enlightenment. I wanted to ask you, you said something that made me very curious. You said, "Oh, I went out learning monasteries, ashrams, traveling around the world." It reminds me of kind of this alchemist journey of looking outside of yourself for the answers that are always within you, that have always been within you. Like, all of that outward journey brings you back to yourself. Did you find that to be true about your journey into figuring out you, or what was going on with you?
Yeah, it would sound like external searching, right? To go here. But really, what I was looking for was a place to sit still, right? I learned early on that if you want to tap into this, you need to meditate. And I was like, all right, well, where's a good place to meditate, right? Again, I was in college at the time. So my friends are business majors, they're in frats, they're going to parties. And I am, in my heart, trying to discover who I am and just sitting still alone in the woods a lot by myself and realizing, I think I'm a monk. I really think my calling is more monastic. So I explored different places to live just because I couldn't quite find the right fit. But I wasn't really looking for anything outside of me. I was really looking for teachers and techniques that could help me to open
Mhm.
up to this experience again more and more, and still to figure out what to do with my life based on that. So, even traveling, going to different schools for my education, it was all part of a deeper mission that I wasn't aware of. Now I am. Because, it took like five, 10 years to really get clarity about why was that experience so significant and how it related to my life's path. Um, but I could comment on your junk DNA theme if you'd like. But generally, yeah, my feeling is it wasn't external searching as much as finding the tools and techniques to be able to tap back into mystical consciousness again, and then to be able to bring others there as well, because there's healing in that, right? If love is the
Mhm.
ultimate healing force, then how do we help others to heal as quickly as possible? Like, where do real miracles come from? So yeah, it wasn't really looking outside of myself. It was just discovering myself and the tools to help others and myself to tap into this again.
Now, you said to me in the past that you had either done the Course in Miracles. Is this Was this around the time frame in your life that you began to study the Course of Miracles?
Yeah, in my religious studies in college, I was introduced to the course somehow. Not in my, not the university, but around that time, I was literally just walking through every bookstore and every library, devouring every book I could. I can't even tell you how many books I read during that time. And A Course in Miracles was one of those. Yet, as a Christian theology, I didn't dive into it. I was doing my Christian studies at the time as a religious scholar. I was like, okay, this is just another one of those. But it was over the years, I kept getting introduced to it again. And sometimes I would see people who practiced it and I really wasn't impressed. I'm like, yeah, okay, I'm going
Mhm.
to put this away again. But eventually I really gave it a heartfelt try. I was willing to say, all right, well, what is this book all about? I've since come to personally believe it is one of the most refined theological systems that we've ever encountered, one of the most refined psychological systems we've ever encountered. And I didn't find any theological errors, I didn't find any grammatical errors. It's remarkably consistent and extremely practical. So, yeah, it took maybe 10 years before I really dove into it, but then that was over 15 years ago. So I've been very actively involved in the course for 15 years. And I still practice with it every day. Its thought system is always greater than mine, especially when I'm miserable or something. Then I'm just like, let me go to Course in Miracles level thinking because it's always better than my
Mm.
egoic thinking.
Mm. Yeah, I think I mentioned to you that I've not studied the Course in Miracles, but my first awareness of it, of its existence, I did not, I was not a scholar of theology or ideologies as a younger person, was through Marianne Williamson's work. And I heard her speak, gosh, it was in London at a consciousness conference, and she spoke of it. And it got me thinking of more about it. And it was before I was awakened in a sense that I had experiences leaving out of my body, but I was still too afraid to do anything about it. And when I say too afraid, this was probably around 2013, 2014. No, probably 2014, 2015 timeframe that I saw Marianne at this conference. And I was working very hard um, in a finance job because I was too afraid to do my conscious work. Um, I- Believing or not understanding how it could support me. So I was very tied up in what I call the money construct, too afraid because I couldn't, in my mind, figure out how it could support me. So of course, me speaking like this tells you I was way far away from this idea of the Course in Miracles, of this believing in yourself and kind of the benevolence of the universe and working from a place of possibilities and potentials. I was fully in a place of limitation and fear, despite having what many would call a crisis awakening and having the ability to travel out of myself and have concepts that were mere abstractions to me, like the concepts of time and reality, come into clarity and focus. I was having aha moments all the time. I could see auras around people and feel energy and see it, be able to move it and manipulate it. So I had that type of full on awakening. And I was not 19 years old, I was 40 years old. And I was, at the middle, arguably the middle of my life, having this experience. I was very unconscious as a 19, 20-year old, fully in the constructs, programs, the conditions that I was born into. I just believed it and kept going, just kept my head down, was on the hamster wheel, like I would say 99% of humanity is. And so, I find it quite remarkable, your journey, because it sounds like that glimpse as a 19-year-old boy, and I call it a boy because, you're 19, still figuring yourself out, and you followed it from there. Um, where I would say I've probably been on a conscious journey since I was maybe 16 years old, asking myself, "Who am I? Why am I here? What is this planet?" Like, what am I doing here? But not having the courage to investigate that questioning and that, like, deep yearning inside of me to understand my own existence. I guess I say all of this to really, I'm quite impressed with all the work that you've done on this journey. You said not to seek, but to have understanding, it sounds like, and a place to be quiet and still. Can you tell us how your focus settled into hypnotherapy from all of this all this work and this journeying that you have done?
Thank you for sharing some of your story because I can relate to the theme of my thought was, how am I going to make money?
Right, right.
I want to be a monk. I want to be celibate. I don't care about the things of the world. And when I would go to these spiritual places in these early years, my parents would be trying to nudge me into a career. And eventually, I was living at Kripala Yoga Ashram, and my parents said, "Why don't you just go back to acupuncture school? We'll pay for it. The family will pay for it. Just please get a career." Because I was a religion and philosophy major. I was like, what am I going to do with a degree in religion and philosophy? I was only about spiritual awakening. So academia wasn't the path to do that. I chose Chinese medicine, again, two different Chinese medical colleges, because I learned about energy blocks. And, simply stated, there's blocks to the awareness of love's presence, to quote A Course in
Mhm.
Miracles. And so, oh, it's not about establishing love, it's about clearing the blocks. So, as I learned a lot about those, I learned those are energetic. So, okay, let's use acupuncture needles to clear these blocks. Yet, in my acupuncture studies, the Yellow Emperor's Classic says the lesser level physician heals in the body level. The mid level physician heals on the energy level. The highest level physician heals on the mental, spiritual level. I was like, oh, well, I'm young enough. I want to be a high level physician. I don't want to just be working in the body and treating symptoms. And
Mhm.
one of the books in Chinese medical school was called Rooted in Spirit. It said all healing must be rooted in spirit. And I'm asking, how is putting needles in someone truly rooted in spirit? We're supposedly manipulating the energy body, and I say manipulating, but I remember asking a teacher, some books say if you turn the needle to the right, it tonifies. Others say if you tone it to the right, it reduces the energy in the point. I said, which one is it? They said, oh, it's not the way you move the needle, it's the power of intention. And then they were
Mm.
teaching really advanced acupuncturists don't need to put the needle in your body. Like, oh,
Mhm, mhm,
it's not
mhm.
the needle. And then they would say, well, you actually can just put your finger over the acupoint. You're directing the power of your own chi. So during this time, I'm like, I think the mind is much more influential in the way these energy balances are manifesting. We learn in Chinese medical college, fear influences your kidneys, anxiety, your heart, anger, your liver, overthinking, your spleen, stomach, pancreas system. And then I'm like, wait, if the majority of these pathologies, right, we talk about environmental pathogens and whatnot,
Mhm.
but when you get down to why are most people suffering? It's because of their emotions, right? If you go to a chiropractor to readjust your spine, uh, if the muscles are really tight, you bring in a massage therapist to loosen the muscles. But if you ask the massage therapist, why are the muscles so tight? They would say, well, there's an energy block there. But then they know when you start pushing on those muscles and moving that energy, people start crying, right? Because all the misalignments tend to come from just a lot of fear contracting the system.
Mm.
So when I'm in acupuncture school, I went and had a hypnotherapy session for myself. And it was profound. But at the end of the session, a voice, which is not the first time I heard this voice, called it the voice of spirit or whatnot, higher self. It was right in front of my face, as clear as day, and it said, "You are going to be a hypnotherapist." And I said, "No, I'm going to be a doctor of Oriental medicine." And the voice said, "No, you're going to be a hypnotherapist." And I was
Ah.
shocked because, you went through medical school and your past was more Western, mine was more
Mhm.
Eastern, but it was still, it takes a lot to go through this type of trainings. You dedicate your life to it. And then to have spirit tell me, yeah, that's not actually your path was really kind of shocking. But I talked to my parents. I said, don't you think, I'm thinking about hypnotherapy. And they said, it sounds like a great profession to fall back upon, even if you don't become an acupuncture physician. And while I was studying hypnotherapy, I was amazed at the power of the mind to heal the body, and everything I knew about anatomy and energetic anatomy just kept pointing to you have to go to the mental level, right? All psychosomatic illness by definition is mental, right? And I don't know what percentage is psychosomatic, but even if 20% of illness is psychosomatic, well, let me tackle that 20% because somebody has to be healing the mind. So I started giving lectures called Healing the Mind, Healing the Body, and had a
Mhm.
very successful practice throughout all my years before opening the school, because we're an institute of hypnotherapy now. Um, yeah, for years I was seeing 25 people a week just focusing on the healing the mind, healing the body concept. Is the mind just became the focus of everything for me.
Wow, you said a lot there. I wanted to go back to this idea of healing the physical body versus the energy body versus the spirit or mental body. As you know, I started my journey healing the physical body. And all through allopathic medicine, it's hyper focused on the physical exam, the physical body. And in fact, we have to use a very objective test to determine the degree of disease. And if the objective test returns no results, then we don't know what's wrong with you. I mean, literally that. I mean, that's a very simplistic way of looking at allopathic medicine. But the way that I was trained, the people in this country and around the world that get MD degrees or medical degrees, that's how we're trained. That it's all like everything. Even if we can't explain it, it's some sort of physical thing. And if we don't know it, it's just because we don't know enough about the physical manifestations of this thing. And I remember in my surgical training, I would have this feeling that we were cutting out disease, but never getting to the root of the issue. And it would bother me and bother me because I knew that there was something going on with that person, but we never allowed space for it. And so there was this process of putting all of our focus on the physical. And it was all about doing physical things to correct it. But one thing that I do believe that we understood, even if we didn't understand why we understood it, was that ultimately the individual must heal themselves. And so this was something that I thought about a lot because it would be a place of anger, frustration, defeat in the allopathic medical community, particularly among surgeons, where it was very much a physical thing that corrected a physical problem. But if the person could not heal from it, the sentiment would be that then they would be passed on to another doctor because you kind of like throw your hands up and say, well, there's nothing more than I could do for this person. But the fundamental belief was you come to me as a surgeon and I cut out the disease, and then you must heal that. I cannot heal for you. You must heal that. I can perhaps put all the things in place to facilitate the healing, but at the end of the day, the individual must heal themselves. And so I thought about that, and it had me remembering during my conscious work. And now that I no longer do the physical surgery, or what we thought was healing, or what I thought was healing, um, and I work in the realm of the soul or the spirit, now, is that I find it, number one, so much more gratifying, but number two, it actually heals. When you heal from that space, from the soul or from spirit, then you heal the physical manifestation of that energy. And that at the very core of everything in knowable and unknowable existence, it's energy at its core. So when we learn, which I think is a much higher, expansive way of healing, a more um, exalted, or attuned way of healing, then we don't have the physical stuff. You don't have the physical manifestations of disease, even the things that we think are autoimmune or chronic illnesses that physically manifest themselves can be healed from the place of the soul. And you may be familiar with Louise Hay's work. She, I believe, was one of the founders of Hay House. And she, for every, physical ailment, she'd have a whole list of them. She would say, "Oh, this is what's going on with you energetically, or spiritually." Just like you were saying about the acupuncture, and where different, or fear and different things, stress, different stressors, guilt, anger, all the lower or denser energies, how they manifest in the physical form. It was maybe a more tedious um, breakdown in her writing. And so I started looking at a lot of that, and realizing that even what we call cancers have a root, an energetic root. And it is up to us, I believe, to awaken to this higher order of healing, to understand what our body is telling us. Like, there's a book called The Body Keeps Score, of all the emotional traumas and dramas from the ancestral realms, from the ancestral planes, that we carry with us, and that manifest in physical disease if these energies are not transformed. Do you find this in your hypnotherapy practice? Are you able to get to the root of what ails the body?
Yes, and all the beautiful things you're saying about realizations you've had over the years, yeah, I was tapping into as well. And I think anybody who asks the question enough, what is healing, eventually has to start looking at the mind, right? So the Louise Hayes work, to say that a certain emotion will always manifest in a certain way, or a certain thought will always manifest in a certain way, to me is pigeonholing. So I prefer to customize each session for the client. Yet the body does keep the score, and the body is a communication device. It tells us essentially, okay, there's something wrong here. So let's say we had stress induced headaches, right? We know, okay, this is stress. But what do we mean by stress? It's not physical. There's no organic reason for these headaches, but you have stress. But what do you mean by stress? Well, really, you're angry, you're sad, you're scared, you feel guilt, you feel grief, you don't feel like you can handle things. You have a whole set of negative belief systems fueling those negative
Mhm.
emotions. I'm not good enough. I'm bad. I'm stupid. I like to joke.
Shame.
Yeah,
Yeah.
for sure. I only have so much time. I can't go through the whole list. But yeah, think about all those human emotions, all those beliefs. I don't know. I like to joke, and I say this very respectfully. I don't know at what point in medical school doctors lose common sense, because we all
Mm.
live in our bodies. If you have one sexual thought, you
Yeah.
instantly have a physiological response. How could you hold 20, 30, 40 years of anger and think it will not affect your body? So with
Mhm.
my clients, just this is the summation of now 30 years being in this field, I learned that we can very easily find the emotions and beliefs connected to a physical symptom, right? So those stress induced headaches, don't see that as a thing because it's not a thing. It's a thought made manifest. Now we just have to specifically find, well, what thoughts? And then eventually we
Mm.
realize, well, all those negative beliefs and emotions manifesting as psychosomatic illness, those come from our memories, right? Past events is what caused all this, but
Mhm.
now it's memories in the subconscious. So if we don't go to that level, we are forgetting, to use a certain quote here, the ghost in the machine, right? The body isn't a machine and we're not a ghost, right? But we forget, if you only look at a physical body like you do in medical school, you forget the person who's in there. Like I remember my
Mhm.
sweet
Mhm.
grandmother, she once looked at her dog and she looked in his eyes and she could tell there was consciousness there. And she said, "There's a person in there." And it was so cute.
Mm.
It was like she realized, oh, the dog has a soul. Well, yeah, there's a being
Right.
in there who
Right.
feels and thinks, not in English, but there's a thinking, feeling being inside of any sentient being. And the human mind, with all those emotions, is so easily forgotten when you dissect a cadaver. But when you sit with another human being and say, "Tell me about that stress that's causing your headaches," you realize there's a person in there. And the
Mm.
person is extremely powerful. So when you get down to the memories, then you start saying, okay, well, yes. So the answer to your question, can hypnotherapy get to root cause? Absolutely. When you start seeing root cause as not just beliefs and emotions, but as memories. However, it's not just one initial sensitizing event, like, oh, if we could just find the one event that caused it. My model of hypnotherapy is called interpersonal hypnotherapy, because after years of looking at what's going on in the subconscious, we see that there are unhealed relationships,
Mhm.
right? So, well, who made you feel helpless and worthless and trapped and powerless and not good enough? Okay, well, that was your dad. Okay, so now you have an inner child and the inner
Mhm.
parent living in the subconscious. And what you find between those two essentially is conflict, but the conflict is primarily rooted in guilt, where the parent makes the child feel bad. And the child, is talking themselves that way. So what you see in the stress-induced type headache, to use that example, is not stress, it's not anger, it's not fear, it's not hurt, it's not all your negative thoughts, it's not even the memories you have with the person who made you feel this way. It's the relationship you have with that person, and therefore it's an unforgiveness. And this is pure Course in Miracles. Now, if you see the headache as simply an unforgiven set of thoughts, and you cut out all the energetic layers, all the emotional layers, because everybody has that. But the root cause is unforgiveness. Once you
Mm.
apply true forgiveness, which is a mental shift, you instantly can move someone from illusion to truth, from fear to love. The mental body, the emotional body, the energy body, the physical body will all follow those miraculous shifts, but you have to be willing to work at the root cause level. And very few people, relatively speaking, are actually well trained to do that.
Mhm.
And that's why, like you said, when a doctor says, "I don't know what to do," you refer to another doctor. But I am on my soapbox, doing these type of talks to help tell everybody. I mean, I have physicians who go through my school, PsyDs, psychiatrists, psychologists, mental health counselors, social workers, because they're just not trained in these techniques.
Mhm.
And it's not that they're not intelligent or capable, their training just doesn't acknowledge this. So
Mhm.
that's why we're working so hard at our institute to raise the standards of hypnotherapy training so it can be a much more respected profession. So people don't say, "Oh, are you going to make me cluck like a chicken?" I'm like, no, I'm here to wake you up to the glory of who you really are and to heal your mind and heal your body. Like, there's so much power to your mind. Um, and yeah, I want to help people to realize that there are techniques we can use to heal the mind, to heal the body.
Before we go, I want to talk a lot more about your work in hypnotherapy, but you gave just a general example of a stress headache. I think I've read statistically that 80% of people, let's just say in the United States, maybe not in the world, have experienced chronic back pain. And I remember thinking about this during my awakening that felt that a lot of chronic back pain was rooted in financial fears and relationship. I guess relationships, to your point, in need of forgiveness. Have you had, I guess, in your practice, do you notice certain manifestations in the physical that are rooted in common or routinely common, I would say, relationship or situational experiences.
Yeah, similar to Louise Hay's work, there are absolutely correlations, and you could probably statistically say, yeah, low back pain in the lower lumbar region probably relates to this type of thinking. But again, I just customize that to my client and say, okay, your low back hurts. Let's figure out what personal beliefs and emotions are happening there. I found a remarkable correlation with the yogic chakra system, where first chakra, which is the tailbone region, deals with issues of security. So financial type themes could manifest there. Second chakra deals with pleasure and often sexuality. So issues there tend to manifest in that region of the body. So I found that simple model, like the third chakra is your solar plex region dealing with personal power. So when people hold beliefs like I'm powerless, I'm trapped, I'm helpless, I'm stuck, I'm out of control, it tends to
They have
go to
ulcers.
yeah, it goes right to
Yeah.
gastrointestinal issues. I have
Hmm,
seen
hmm.
Crohn's disease, ulcerative colitis, irritable bowel syndrome, endometriosis. I have seen fibroid tumors, uterine tumors. I have seen these things healed, like medically verified, healed by
Hmm.
making these mental changes. But again, I'm very careful not to pigeonhole and say, oh, if you have low back pain, it must mean you have money issues. I would just explore, how do you feel about your low back pain? So a simple model is, when you think about ulcers, you could say, how do you feel about your ulcers? Oh, my ulcers make me so angry.
Hmm, hmm.
Well, maybe your anger is causing your ulcers. We all know this. That's all common sense. But we forget that because in medical school, you're looking for what bacteria must be causing the ulcer,
Yeah,
what
yeah.
virus must be causing the ulcer. Maybe your intense rage is causing your ulcer. We all know this, right? So, how you feel about your problem is quite often the emotion causing your problem. And that tends to be the best model to work with
Hmm,
instead of
hmm.
looking at a book and saying, oh, low back pain must equal this emotion. Let's just ask the client, okay, your low back hurts. How does it make you feel? And then the emotion they bring up tends to be the emotion causing the problem. Like,
Mm,
oh, I hate my low back pain. Okay, we have to look at your hatred. You're harboring hatred in there. Let's not forget how destructive that is, right? In A Course in Miracles, it says the one fundamental error that every patient comes into a therapist's office with is the belief that anger brings him something he
mm,
wants, and by justifying attack, he is protecting himself. Right? And the Course in Miracles talks about one problem, one solution. The one problem is separation, separation from universal love. And the one solution is oneness, right? And that's why forgiveness is the key. So, yeah, once we find out, oh, most likely you're harboring a lot of anger and guilt, and that's affecting whatever organ system in your body, all we have to do is get you to stop holding all that anger. And again, that goes back to
mm.
forgiveness work.
Oh my goodness. Well, this has been just a lovely discussion. Matthew, I suspect people that hear you speak may want to know how they can maybe more about your work and how they can find you. Can you share with us, I guess, the work that you do specifically around hypnotherapy, and how people can find you?
Yeah, our school is instituteofhypnotherapy.com. So again, instituteofhypnotherapy.com. I don't see too many clients these days. I usually just maybe one a week. But if somebody really wants to work with me, I tend to not say no. I just keep my hourly rate high so I can focus on working in the school. I don't even teach that much anymore as a whole team of teachers. But yeah, I have tons of free resources. I have almost 1,000 graduates. I could always refer to really high level practitioners, whether it's therapeutic or non therapeutic uses of hypnosis. Like I can find the right person to help someone usually. So, yeah, anybody who's looking for help in hypnotherapy and wants a very highly trained, well trained hypnotherapist, instituteofhypnotherapy.com. And then I have another website called onlinemonastery.com where I teach a 100-hour meditation course completely for free. And you can get really basic training on that website. And then for people like yourself, Susan, it can go really, really deep into Merkaba, sacred geometry, teachings on samadhi and tantra. I mean, some really, really good stuff. Again, onlinemonastery.com.
Oh, wow. Well, Matthew, I want to thank you so much for taking time with us today and sharing just your journey and the good that you're doing in the world. I think really the shift occurring on the planet, perhaps several shifts, but one of the shifts I believe is into conscious awareness. And this is why I do this podcast, to bring voices like yours to perhaps a broader audience and to really intrigue the mind, to propel, I would say, a shift in perspective, an elevation in consciousness. I definitely will look into your resources, and I'm sure that our guests hearing this will also like to learn more about you and your works. Thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you so much. My pleasure.
I want to thank you for taking this inner journey with us today. And whether you are coming or going, looking inside or out, remember to be conscious. If you love this episode and if today's message resonated with you, please subscribe, rate, and review the Be Conscious podcast. I want to know what inspired you and what conscious topics you would like to hear more about. And if you want, you can share those thoughts and questions with me at info@susannicholas.org.
Thanks for listening to the Be Conscious podcast with author, TEDx international speaker, and conscious coach, Dr. Susan Nicholas. Be sure to connect with her to stay up to date with her latest news and works. Learn more about her conscious speaking platform at susannicholas.org/speaking. Stay tuned for the next thought-provoking episode. And whether you are coming or going, looking inside or out, remember to be conscious.